Hello everyone and welcome back. This is S.C. Coleman, author, and this video will be a continuation of the last video, and I expect I will be doing a series of videos on this specific topic. This next installation is detailing exactly who the people are behind the referenced entity in the last video, the alleged Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs. There are a large number of Assistant Secretaries, and it's likely that all of them have these broad, sweeping powers and capabilities that are far beyond any president or prime minister or individual entity that we have since known. Now, on that document, it listed specifically that all of activities had to be coordinated with the General Counsel, or Office of the General Counsel, of the Department of Defense. These are not military, they are civilian. They're civilians in every capacity. They have no concept of realistic military application or reality itself. They live in an ivory tower in an isolated environment, and they're protected in most parts from the consequences of their actions. But they also all function in a very specific way in which they are trained. The document that I read in the last video was very clearly coming from an attorney perspective, possibly from any attorney firm, foundation, a group, a partnership, or whatever you want to call it, from around the planet. But the biggest question here that I would postulate is how involved in the child harvesting operations, insulated onto military bases, and specifically and only operated by very specific civilian operatives, how involved were these attorneys? If you can answer that question, I believe the motive for these operations of extensive treason become apparent. So the first document that we're going to look at here is the General Counsel of the Department of Defense as the letterhead, dated August 1st, 2022. Now, I would also stipulate that the dates on these documents cannot always be trusted. Yes, they've been running this playbook and they've been planning these things for a while, but these people are also known to intentionally backdate things. They are not above blatant fraud, especially considering all of the other implications of what they're doing. This is listed to the Honorable J. Dennis Hastert. It does not have the typical from section that you would find on legal letters. This proposal would create the position of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense. Sincerely, William J. Haynes II. And then we have another letter which is just repeating the same thing. This would create the position of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense, Honorable Richard B. Cheney, William J. Haynes II. Now, when we get into the next paragraph, we understand how this works. This is a legal line-by-line document that you find in the U.S. Code. And this is how they edit at will the U.S. Code. Increase in number of Assistant Secretaries of Defense, Section 138, Title 10, United States Code is amended by striking 9 and inserting 10. Public law, blah, 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 in which case such subsection A is amended by striking 8 and inserting 9. Conforming amendment, Section 5315 of Title 5 United States Code is amended, and with regard to the item referring to Assistant Secretary of Defense by striking 9 and inserting 10, National Defense Authorization Act amended by 8 and 9, blah, blah, blah. So basically the idea here is that these individuals, they attach their cover letters, but there's no Congress. Congress is a fake entity. It is public theater. And anybody who gets wrapped up in that is being involved in a hoax. All of our state houses in every state, every single Congress is a hoax. It is designed to waste your time chasing after the carrot. but it's not even real carrot. It's more like a plastic carrot. Because you never, even if you caught it, it wouldn't make any difference. It's not real. The real, as far as we're concerned, are the attorneys in this capacity with their capabilities to change and insert and directly modify the legal textual documents like the U.S. Code. So if you want to explain this in simple terms, you have your cover letters to establish a facade of correspondence with Congress, where this is the only actual document that makes any difference. They write out the document and it is placed into the code, and that's it. There's no approval process. There is no discussion. It is simply done. And these are the ones doing it. The next document, Laura Coupe, or Coupe. This is a resume and appears like an application, a privileged application for a job position. Languages, apart from English, Kikongo, Spanish, and French, lists under native or bilingual, and I would lean more towards the native, Luxembourgish, and German. This is a common theme that you find, specifically because representatives and attorneys from the United Nations come into our country and run it on behalf of foreign interests. So, listing the order of alleged work, and like I said, you can't trust really anything that these people do because they're not above blatantly lying about things. Cast Strategies LLC, Senior Advisor for Defense International Affairs, January 25th, or January 2025 to present, 9 months. Congolese Diaspora Impact Strategies LLC, Co-Founder and Managing Partner, 2020 to present, 5 years. United States Department of Defense, Senior Advisor to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, January 2024 to January 2025. Special Assistant to the Assistant Secretary for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs, Detail, April 2022 to January 2024, 1 year and 10 months. Special Assistant to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, Eurasia, Detail, August 2021 to April 2022, 9 months. Senior Advisor to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, February 2021 to August 2021, 7 months. U.S. House of Representatives, Council on the Committee on Homeland Security, January 2019 to February 2021, 2 years, 2 months. RAND Corporation Policy Analyst, April 2017 to January 2019, 1 year, 10 months. U.S. Department of Homeland Security Special Assistant in the Office of International Engagement, European Affairs, November 2015 to January 2017, 1 year and 3 months. Executive Office of the President, Director, Domestic Agency Team, Presidential Personal Office, Detail, May 2015 to October 2015, 6 months. U.S. Department of Homeland Security Briefing Book Coordinator to Secretary Jed Johnson, June 2014 to May 2015, 1 year. U.S. House of Representatives Fellow, September 2013 to June 2014, 10 months. And it doesn't list anything beyond that. Other than under education, which I'm sure this will surprise no one, University of Michigan Law School, Doctor of Law, JD. This is certainly going to be a repeating theme. Memorandum from the, allegedly, it's got the letterhead, Deputy Secretary of Defense anyway, March 25th, 2003. And this is something I mentioned before. A lot of these attorneys, they have all these letterheads sort of stacked up in their office so they could essentially adopt whatever artifice they need, and they manage everything through, like paperwork, essentially. Completely fraudulent, obviously, but the apparatus, the functional apparatus of this is that you have these attorneys and their privileged little groups and clubs who go around publishing documents which are then leveraged in the real reality, in the real world, by so-called law enforcement. They are the special military arm of attorneys. And this is the reason why they want to transition all military assets into this law enforcement designation, because they know that. They know how it works. They submit all this fraudulent paperwork. It's picked up by these entities who don't know any better, who just blatantly ignore the Constitution because they don't have any real oaths of allegiance to it. And then they go around kicking down people's doors based off this fraudulent documentation, and that is how the system works. So this is memorandum 4, and I'm not going to list out the whole list, as you can see, just the important ones. General Counsel of the Department of Defense, operational test and evaluation assistance to the Secretary of Defense, administration and management, force transformation, net assessment director, defense agencies, and DoD field activities. The Honorable Paul McHale, don't they love to give themselves these little lofty titles and call themselves honorable? You might as well call them His Grace, right? Has been appointed as the first Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense, ASDHD. And then they reduce Homeland Defense to the simple two letters HD and H, or HD. That's a common legal tactic where they create these long names and then they reduce it down to a couple letters. And then they always cite all their complicated and excessive places that you need to go and look up, but it's designed to waste your time and also to look official, because they don't actually bother with any of that work anyway. They just have these copy and paste, fill in the blank sort of templates. The duties and authorities associated with these DoD executive agent assignments are delegated to the ASDHD effective today. Also effective today, the delegation of authority to oversee the management and coordination of DoD support to international and national special events, including without limitations events incurred under 10 U.S.C. 2564, is transferred from the Secretary of the Army to the ASDHD. Isn't that interesting that who they're attempting to implement with paperwork? They're attempting to transfer all mechanical operational control from military components and assets to the hands of attorneys specifically, so these attorneys, and then they use it as a paperwork conquest so they can go sweeping out through the entire country, taking over everything from water to air to electric to power to oil to absolutely everything and they're using it through paperwork, but with the threat of so-called law enforcement, because the law enforcement are there to enforce their law, and their law is promulgated through phony paperwork. Effective no later than May 16th, 2003, and then, like I said, this could be backdated. It's hard to say. Following additional transfers and transitions of delegated authority, personnel, and associated resources as shown are directed to focus and align the department with regard to Homeland Defense. From the Army to the Office of the ASDHD, transfer the functions and associated resources of the Office of Special Assistant for Military Support, Civilian 3, Military 2, and Total 5. The Director of Administration and Management in coordination with the USDP, the USD Comptroller, the General Counsel of the Department of Defense, and other cognizant officials will take the actions necessary to implement this direction. The attachment provides additional guidance to implement these and other actions. Now it's signed, but as far as I would say, that signature is mostly unreadable. I wouldn't really even try to guess at, other than maybe it looks like Paul Wohlhout, something like that. Additional implementation guidance regarding the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense. To prepare a memorandum for my approval within 30 days defining the domestic crisis management structure within OSD, coordinate the memorandum with the CJCS, the Undersecretary of Defense, the Assistant Secretary for Defense for Command Control, Communications and Intelligence or successor organizations, the GC, General Counsel, DoD, and the DAAM, or DAM. It's also similar to when somebody says like the DA instead of the district attorney. Right, they love to do all of this stuff. So this is essentially expansive treason by attorneys seeking to leverage law enforcement as their own personal army, essentially. And obviously eliminate any type of possible resistance or enemy assets, including every single active duty personnel, reserve, veteran, or force component that isn't, technically speaking, law enforcement. Which also includes every gun owner and armed American in the United States. apart from other places. The USDC, the USDP, and the Director of Program Analysis and Evaluation shall promulgate updated planning, programming, and budgeting system, PPBS. Guidance documents begin with the current PPBS cycle that reflect these organizational, functional, and personal alignments and requirements, and that includes separate guidance for DoD Homeland Defense matters. And so that's basically explaining their plan on how all of these memorandums of understanding under what office, between what office, under what pretext, cover story, letterhead, whatever you will. This is detailing that's the plan, is to promulgate all of that with all these phony signatures, all these people adopting whatever artifice, facade, cover identity they need, and they're all attorneys. They're working together in their little attorney lodges, in their little clubhouses, where they get behind closed doors and decide how everybody's life is going to be run. So you've got a Melissa G. Dalton, and now this is going to be a cover story. I guarantee that the picture of this individual is going to line up with many other places, many other people, many other identities. It's going to at some point line up with an attorney, but this photo, I guarantee, will be found in many other locations, because this is supposed to look like one of the shot caller attorney types, to give them a backstory, a cover profile, whatever you will. This is for an alleged Melissa G. Dalton, definitely a fake name, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs. Melissa Dalton was sworn in. That's another thing they love to do. They always love to do swearing-ins. Of course, the oath means absolutely nothing. Melissa Dalton was sworn in as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs on March 4th, 2022. Prior to joining CSCIS, which stands for Center for Strategic and International Studies, that's another cover story used by universities to implement activities of money laundering, weapons smuggling, human trafficking, and a whole bunch of other things. This International Studies cover designator, which was run through universities and is a product of the Central Intelligence Agency's work against the American public. People, natural persons, right? We always have to be accurate with what we're talking about because of the word games these attorneys play. Prior to joining CSIC in 2014, Ms. Dalton served for a decade as a career civil servant in the Bush and Obama administration at DoD. Now, whether or not that's true, and if it were, then that would lead to other questions and possibly other points of research, but I would probably lean towards that's fake. It's just a backstory, cover identity for one of these attorneys to go around and say, I'm the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs because my face matches up with, and here's a little backstory for you to believe anything I tell you. She is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and was a Council on Foreign Relations International Affairs Fellow. So if that doesn't give you the right picture, then I'm sure there's a lot more documents that will continue to prove this hidden hand of attorneys attempting to leverage law enforcement global military occupational mechanism, and of course bring in all of their friends from foreign lands to assist them in these types of treasonous activities. And there is just simply so much more documentation that I will have to pick and choose the pieces I'm going to focus on. And in the next video, I do plan on doing what I promised in the first, which is to talk about the actual functional apparatus of the transition from so-called Department of Defense to Department of Homeland Security for quote-unquote law enforcement activities, where they transition all the military assets, equipment, Humvees, bullets, guns, all that stuff into the hands of subcontracted security guards so that those people can go around and be their global empire thugs going around and conducting physical conquest on behalf of their law, which are these fraudulent documents published through their attorney system.